Yeah, I mean, up to this point, you're looking at there's a real possibility Georgia doesn't even make a 12-team playoff. Hey, y'all, we are back with another episode of the podcast. We're going to be talking some college football today. I've got my man Max on the line. Max, how are we doing today?
Doing good today. Hey, shout out to all the tens and tens of followers we got already off of our first two episodes. We're gonna keep rolling. Hopefully, deliver some more good top content.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the love. We got a listener from Norway, so international, baby. But I think where we need to start off, obviously, is those two SEC clashes we were talking about last week and how important they are. First off, Alabama LSU. Night game in Death Valley. It's a big one, and Alabama came out and just smoked them. I mean, 42-13, wasn't close. Alabama looks like the team that was beating Georgia in the first half. What were your takeaways from that game?
Yeah, it wasn't close in any way. Alabama just came out swinging, and they kept swinging, and LSU couldn't do anything about it. Kalen DeBoer continues to prove that he just wins, man. I mean, this is, I think, maybe his second worst season from a win-loss column record, which is insane because he has two losses and it is now in the SEC with, the best of the best. So Kalen DeBoer continuing to prove that he is just one of those dudes when it comes to leading a college football team. So Alabama, definitely one of the teams to beat based off of that game.
Yeah, interesting because LSU only ran for 104 yards. Bama only passed for 109. But holy Jalen Milroe, man. 12 carries, 185, and four tutties on the ground. I mean, that's ridiculous to be doing that against the SEC defense. You messed around and gave Kalen DeBoer an athletic quarterback, too, not just one that can sling the ball, man. Golly.
Yeah, and this is maybe a little bit off topic in the scope of college football, but just like how the NFL will view Jalen Milroe will be really interesting going forward. Like, yes, he's a quarterback. He can sling it. But, man, this dude is just insane on his legs. So if it doesn't work out at quarterback, put him anywhere, and he'll get the job done. He's just an athletic freak. But it will be really interesting going forward to see how teams view him because he did everything on the ground in this game, and just it looks easy for him. So I will be curious to see how that goes for him.
Yeah, I wonder if he gets viewed as a Lamar Jackson type or one of more of those. I don't know if you remember Braxton Miller from Ohio State, but it was like, he's a good athlete. Let's see if we can put him anywhere on the field kind of deal. But, I mean, if he can throw the ball well at the NFL, I mean, he's going to go to the NFL and still be one of the best athletes. So, I mean, sky is the ceiling for that guy, man. I mean, he's
Yeah, it's
no limit on him.
good to bring up Lamar. I think this will be honestly worse for Jalen Milroe because Lamar showed quite a bit more as a passer. So Jalen Milroe is going to be dealing with always a running back for pretty much the whole cycle, I think, of draft
Yeah.
season. But hopefully he gets to put out some tape that makes some teams believe that he can develop as a passer and get that ideal top five, whatever quarterback pick range. So we'll see how it goes for him.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, implications of this game are massive. LSU's done. I mean, USC loss is looking worse and worse every week. And they pulled out that Ole Miss win by a thread, same with South Carolina. And then you just get blown out by an Alabama team that has shown high levels of inconsistency. I mean, they're a two-loss team, and it's just it's not a great look for them. At 6-3, they're done.
Yeah, this was, like we said on the last show, this was a playoff game in a way, and Alabama knocked them out of the playoffs. So LSU's still a tough team to beat. They'll get a great bowl game, but as far as making the playoffs, they're definitely out of it.
Yeah. And then the other SEC clash, man, Georgia, Ole Miss, another game that just, I was really hoping we got to watch some good games out of these. They weren't. They were just master classes by two teams. And I didn't expect it to be Ole Miss. If you told me that one team was going to dominate that game, I would have said Georgia. If you said Ole Miss was going to win close, I'd have been like, okay, I can see it. An Ole Miss blowout was probably the last thing I was expecting out of that game. Especially, I mean, Georgia scores 7 points early, is up 7-0, and then 28-3 down the stretch. Ole Miss just buried them. Carson Beck looks like he doesn't know what a football is, and it's all bad vibes over in Athens. Great at Ole Miss though. What were you seeing in that game?
Yeah, pretty similar to what you just said. Ole Miss took it and ran. I mean, Carson Beck, the downfall of Carson Beck kind of needs to be studied. He was kind of billed as this great, great at reading defenses, very accurate with the football, good decision maker. And in the past, pretty much the whole season, he has been none of those things. So, as a Georgia fan, you got to be disappointed. I mean, this guy was getting hyped up as, oh man, he's probably a first round quarterback at this point, and he hasn't shown any of that. So that's unfortunate. But Georgia, just every week, it seems like this is how it feels, other than one game, which was Texas. And it's kind of crazy to look at that Texas game, and go, Georgia absolutely blew them out. When every single other team they're pretty much playing, they're barely squeaking by with wins. And now they picked up two losses. So Georgia is kind of backs against the wall here, just fighting to make a playoff spot. While Ole Miss, when you look at their remaining schedule, they're in a pretty damn good spot to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they're at Florida and then host Mississippi State, which are two very winnable games, especially if Lagway doesn't make his way back. A couple other notes from that game. Georgia, 245 total yards. That's the least amount of yards since Kirby Smart took over at Georgia. And 186 of that was passing yards, which means only 59 rushing yards. I mean, that's the thing that's plagued Georgia. You can look at Carson Beck turning the ball over, but they can't run the ball. And it's making Carson Beck have to throw in third and long situations, and that's going to set him up for failure. I mean, we've seen that. In my opinion, I don't think Carson Beck is that high of a ceiling guy. And if you're asking him to bail you out on 3rd and 8 over and over and over again, I don't think you're going to find good results. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing. Georgia averaged 3.8 yards per play. I mean, just an abysmal showing from the offense.
Yeah, it's been bad. And the defense has honestly been really disappointing as well, for how many, top five defensives they've shown in the past few seasons. This is not the same Georgia defense. And while they still have a ton of talent, I don't know what's going on. They're not playing up to the talent that they have on that defense. They're letting up points left and right. And you combine that with an offense that really can't do much of anything, and you get the season that Georgia's had, which has been disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, up to this point, you're looking at there's a real possibility Georgia doesn't even make a 12-team playoff. I mean, if you would have told somebody that at the beginning of the season, they would have looked at you like you were crazy, but that's really what we're kind of staring down the barrel of. And like I said, I mean, it's not just a one-time thing. It's not like, oh, man, they just didn't have it against Ole Miss, or they didn't have it for one half against Alabama. Like, beating Kentucky by 1 point is not good, man. It's not good. They give up 31 to Mississippi State. Like, Mississippi State was in that game for a long time. And Florida, if Lagway doesn't go out, you're not convincing me that Florida doesn't win that game. So just it's not a great look, and it just doesn't – as much as you want to buy in because of the brand, especially with that Texas game where it's like, oh, that's Georgia. Like, Georgia's back. I can't do it. Like, they're showing us plenty of patterns that they're just not the same team this year.
Yeah. That Texas game was honestly now just kind of looks like an anomaly for them. Like, how did they do it? How did they go in and beat a team that everyone kind of has as the top 3 team in the country right now? That kind of seemed like the turning point for them, and then they followed it up with barely beating Florida and then getting blown out by Ole Miss. So not looking good for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, speaking of the SEC, I mean, that is a jumbled mess going on. I mean, you look at it, you got Ole Miss now 2 losses, Bama has 2 losses. I think Texas is the lone team with 1 loss in the SEC. I think I'm going to have to double check that, but I think it's just Texas.
I believe Tennessee
with 1 loss.
Oh,
yeah, Tennessee
loss.
Too. Tennessee. I forgot about Tennessee somehow. But that's going to kind of get me into who's your best team in the SEC right now. Who do you got?
It's tough. I think there's 3 teams in contention for this number 1 spot. I lean Alabama, and I know Tennessee has the head-to-head over them. Texas has only 1 loss compared to Bama's 2 losses, but Kalen DeBoer first season as Alabama's head coach, and they look dangerous right now. LSU is not an easy team to beat, especially in Death Valley, against a coach in Brian Kelly that doesn't lose that much either. So I think Alabama is kind of the team to beat in the SEC right now, and they honestly are going to need some help in order to make the SEC championship, given that Texas is ahead of them, Tennessee is ahead of them. So we'll see if they even make the SEC championship, which maybe that should go into this ranking. But honestly, if I just had to rank who would I least want to play right now, I'm putting Bama at the top.
Yeah, I think one game Alabama probably has the highest ceiling. They should finish a two-loss team. They have Mercer at home. I can't believe the SEC still does this thing where they have the random FCS opponent in November. It's ridiculous. I mean, I get that the schedule's brutal, but at least schedule like Duke or something, like Mercer.
Yes, something. Anything but one of the worst teams in college football.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And then at Oklahoma, and then they host Auburn. If it was at Auburn, then you kind of think about it and go, okay, Iron Bowl, but it's in Alabama, so I'm not really looking at that too hard. So I think Alabama, should be able to – now, granted, they lost to Vanderbilt, but they should be able to coast to a 10-2 record. My top team is going to be Tennessee. I'm going to respect the head-to-head here, and I think there's just less variability. Now, maybe that's an unfair statement because they lost to Arkansas, and then they went to OT with Florida, but that was with Lagway, and we've seen Florida do some interesting things. So I don't think maybe that's as scary as some other people think it is. Obviously, the Arkansas loss isn't looking good, but I mean they beat Alabama, and I think they looked relatively in control of that game for the majority of the game. And I respect the head-to-head. Their defense looks good. Can Nico continue to improve? That's kind of the thing. Like I said, Alabama's got the highest ceiling, but I think Tennessee, just with a little bit more consistency, I'm going to put them at number one.
Well, I agree with you that Tennessee is a lot more consistent from honestly, it's just because of their defense. Their defense is top notch, man. They got some dudes on the defensive line. James Pierce might be a top 10 pick here. A couple other guys that are just really, really good. They just don't let up many points, man. Holding Alabama to 17 points. Let's see. They have not let up over 20 points this season. So it's a ridiculously good defense. And the offense, while it isn't nearly as consistent, it's good enough to get you, at least 20 points a game. And that's a winning combo there. You score more than 20, you let up less than 20, you're going to win. So they are a very consistent team. But they still don't take my number 2 spot. I have Texas at number 2. They did get handled by Georgia at home, which is the one stain on their resume right now. And while they haven't necessarily played a ton of top-notch teams, I guess their probably second best win would be Michigan at that point, where they blew out Michigan early in the season. I think this is just kind of from a talent perspective. These guys have so many dudes. Quinn Ewers is playing the best football of his career right now, playing himself into the first-round conversation. You got Isaiah Bond on the outside at receiver, also playing himself in the first-round conversation. The defense has been playing extremely well. Honestly, it's a team that went to the playoffs last season, the 4-team playoff, almost came back and beat Washington, and they got better this season. So I like Texas at number 2. Got stunned there by Georgia, but I think they rally and they finish the season undefeated, go to the SEC championship.
Yeah, I've got Alabama at 2. I'm going to put Texas at 3. I think the reasons you highlighted with Texas, they look dominant against Michigan, and then it's like, does that actually mean anything? No, not to me. They've played, I think you can really say, depends on what you think of Oklahoma, but they've played one really quality team, in my opinion, and that's Georgia. They got smoked. They got handled from wire to wire. And then they played Vanderbilt the next week. It's in Vandy. You're coming off that Georgia loss. But they won that game by 3. Vanderbilt was there the whole way. So when I'm looking at teams that have any sort of quality to them that Texas has played, I don't see a lot. And Alabama has They have a better win. Their wins are better than Texas's wins. Now they have the 2 losses, and a Georgia loss is really not the end of the world, especially when Georgia looked like they were going to go scorched earth after their loss. But I think that's why I have Texas below Alabama. I got to put Texas in my 3 slot. Now they could prove me wrong, but I mean the SEC is so jumbled, man. It's really hard. I think it's really tough to rank those teams, but I think Tennessee, Texas, Alabama should be a consensus top 3 in the league.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you want to grade the flashes and the high ceiling, you go with Bama. If you want consistency, you go with Tennessee. And then if you just kind of want overall, I guess just they've been consistent for 2 seasons now. They just keep winning games. You go with Texas, just kind of the continuity from last season. So I think any 3 of those teams you could put in any position in that top 3.
Yeah, so that brings me to my next question. What teams from the SEC right now would you pick to make the playoff?
Bama, Texas, Tennessee, and Ole Miss would be the 4 teams that I think make it from the SEC. I think, which we'll talk about here in a sec, I think Tennessee beats Georgia, which knocks them out. And I think Texas beats Texas A&M, which knocks Texas A&M out. And you're not really looking at any other team that's got a shot to make it that I'm seeing at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Tennessee, Texas in the SEC championship game, if that is what happens, man, that's going to be UT versus UT, man. That's some heat right there. They're going to be
That's a big one.
They're going to be talking a lot of smack across the fan bases there. But yeah, I think Texas should beat Texas A&M. Now, things get really interesting if Georgia and Texas A&M pull off those upsets. You got a whole bunch of 2-loss teams in a cluster. I mean, you're looking at maybe 5 teams get in if weird stuff happens around the rest.
It's ugly.
Yeah, then it could get really interesting. But as it stands right now, I agree with you. I think Ole Miss should get in. If Georgia gets blown out by Tennessee, maybe that kind of weakens what they got going on. But I still think they should get in. Tuesday, wherever the committee puts them, if they put them ahead or behind Georgia, I think is going to be huge. Whether or not they're ahead or behind of Boise State is also going to be really big. And also, I don't think they would put them ahead of Bama based on their losses. But they beat Georgia by a lot more than Alabama did. So if they take that into consideration, if they put them ahead of Bama, that would be crazy. I would not agree with that in any sense. But interesting. But yeah, as of right now, Tennessee, Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, those are my SEC picks for the playoff. But there's a whole bunch more to discover. Man, I love the 12-team playoff. There's just so much going on.
That's so much more fun. I mean, we're talking about 2-loss teams. Still have a chance. I mean, just last season, if you had 1 loss, it was a sweat to make the playoffs. So,
just if you had 0 losses, you weren't guaranteed to get in. So, I mean,
yeah, exactly. Florida State,
go undefeated, can't make it. Can't buy you a spot.
That is just so much more fun. Your season isn't done when you lose a game.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's going to bring me to our power rankings. Well, we're not going to do power rankings. We're going to go how we think the committee should rank these 12 teams. Again, we're recording this on Monday night, so the rankings will drop tomorrow evening, and we'll see how correct we are. We're not necessarily trying to predict what the committee is going to do, but we're putting out what we think the rankings should be based on what we've seen. Not necessarily who would win head-to-head or anything like that, but just if we were ranking the teams, if we were the committee, this is the list we put out. And at number 1, pretty easy here, it's Oregon. Undefeated, arguably the best win in the country. I'd probably give that to Georgia. I think that's the best win in the country. But a win against the number 2 team in the country, man, that was a great game. I mean, obviously they deserve to be there. They look like they're just continuing to improve. Boise State win is a quality win too. So I don't think there's much debate at that one spot. It's Oregon, as long as you're seeing it the same way.
Yep, it's Oregon. Oregon's been probably the most consistent team in the country. Every spread that drops, they cover. They've been beating every single team. Ohio State, wow, they got the W. Maybe shouldn't have if Will Howard could understand the situation and not run and slide with 6 seconds remaining and no timeouts. Ohio State would have, a shot at a 40, 45-ish yard field goal to take that win. But hey, a win's a win, man. And Ohio State has is going to be our number two team, I believe. And so Oregon, with arguably the best win in the country and a great win over number 12 Boise State, and man, they just keep blowing teams out. It looks easy for them. So, yep, easily number one, which leads into our number two as Ohio State. As we just mentioned, lost to Oregon in a close one. Probably should have won it, but they didn't. And since then, they finally got a top five win against a team that I still view as fraudulent, Penn State. But hey, it's a top five win. Little closer maybe than you'd think. But they got that win. That's definitely one of probably a top five-ish win here in the country. So the talent on that team is just ridiculous. Jeremiah Smith, their freshman wide receiver, is ridiculous. So much talent, a lot of good wins, and only one loss to the best team in the country. So yeah, number two, Ohio State.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna go number three. We got Texas. Now I said I'd put Tennessee ahead of them, but if I was gonna rank them, I'm putting Texas at three. Their losses to Georgia, which is much better than a loss to Arkansas, regardless of where you're playing. And it's just they've looked good, man. They've blown out pretty much every team they've played, save Georgia and Vandy. It hasn't really looked that close. There's not much reason to doubt them. Like you said, they've shown that consistency from last year. So I don't think there's too much of a debate here. I got Texas at three, or we got Texas at three.
Yep. And then number four, Tennessee. Tennessee, like we talked about, they let up less than 20 points a game, every single game. That defense is ridiculous. Their offense is consistent enough to keep getting wins. They got one bad loss to Arkansas, but a fantastic looking win against Alabama. So I think they easily slide in at that number four spot.
Yeah, and then number five, we're going to go undefeated Indiana. They got tested against Michigan. I had the itch before that game that I thought something might happen. It got hairy. I think they had like 50 yards of total offense in the second half until their last drive that kind of put the game away. It didn't look good. The alarm bells are ringing a little bit for me. I'm concerned, but a win's a win, like we said. They're undefeated, and I think they've looked better than BYU, so we got them at five.
BYU barely hanging on against Utah. Last second field goal to win the game. But they're undefeated. So undefeated in the Big 12, got a couple ranked wins in there. So you kind of have to put them in there at number six, right behind Indiana, ahead of Alabama, two-loss team, ahead of Penn State, and one-loss team. They're an undefeated team in a Power Four conference. So got to give them the respect they deserve for getting those wins. We shall see if they continue to hold on to that undefeated win column there. They're looking like they might get upset here pretty soon. But still got to give credit where credit's due. BYU at six.
Yeah, BYU, man, I mean, rivalry game on the road, and they find a way to gut it out. I mean, they're down 21-10, they come back. I mean, it's kind of glass half full, glass half empty kind of game. Like, do you really respect their resolve to be able to go in there, face all that adversity, and take care of business after being down 11? Or are you like, oh, maybe they're just not that good of a football team? You know, we'll see. TBD on BYU. Not a huge BYU believer, but in terms of where you got to have them ranked, I agree. They're number six. And then seven, Alabama. We got them ahead of some one-loss teams, but man, when they look good, they look like they're the best team in the country. I mean, holy smokes, Jalen Milroe insane. We discussed that at length. I mean, Bam at seven. Like, that's what I got.
Yeah, I got no problems with that. They've got two fantastic wins right now. And looking at some of these other teams, they look a lot more impressive than these other ones. So leading into, unfortunately, number eight, Penn State. They get to really beat anybody. They just have one loss to Ohio State. But hey, they keep blowing out all the kind of the bottom of the barrel teams in the Big Ten. And honestly, in this 12-team playoff, even just like not that impressive of a resume, a lot of teams don't have that impressive of a resume. So they just kind of limp their way to the number eight spot. And if they keep winning, they'll probably be in the playoffs. So yeah, Penn State at number eight.
Yeah, an important distinction there. I mean, it's looking like it's going to be Ohio. It'll be Oregon and then Ohio State or Indiana most likely in that playoff because Penn State doesn't play Indiana. Ohio State will have the tiebreak. If Indiana beats Ohio State, common opponent's going to go to Indiana. So they probably don't make the Big Ten championship. In very, very likely they don't. And that could be beneficial to them, to be honest. Give them a bye. You don't have to play that big game, and then you're kind of guaranteed into the playoff. You're not going to have a second loss on your resume to really consider. So it might be kind of beneficial for them. Important distinction that they are at number 8 because that's going to be a first-round home game. So big difference between number 8 and number 9. I'm so excited for home games in the playoff. I think they should be home games in the second round. Home games are sick.
Yeah, that'll be electric.
But yeah, home Happy Valley, man. How we got it ranked right now, it would be Notre Dame going to Penn State. That'd be a heck of a game. Notre Dame at 9. They're a one-loss team there with Miami. They beat Georgia Tech. Miami didn't. They've got the bad loss to NIU, but that's their only loss, and they just kind of blow everyone out. That Texas A&M win continues to look pretty good. I mean, how much do you buy into week 1? That's kind of, however you decide to view it. But I got them at 9.
Yeah, I got no issues with that. Notre Dame won just horrendous loss, which keeps them behind the likes of Penn State. But yeah, they just blow out every single team. And while it isn't necessarily an impressive resume, given that they tend to play the ACC, it's still not bad. So Notre Dame at number 9, which leads into Miami finally getting a loss. They've been flirting with it
time.
For, I don't know, the past 10 weeks. Their defense can't stop anything. Their offense can't be stopped. And all of a sudden, Georgia Tech rolls in, and they do both things. They
Yeah.
get enough points, and they finally put the clamps on Miami. So Miami, I think, was at number 4 last week, if I'm not mistaken, in the college football playoff ranking. So one loss, you're probably not going to drop them all the way outside of the top 12, given that they were undefeated up until that point, and that offense is electric. But finally getting a loss, still probably the favorite to win the ACC, so we slot them in at number 10.
Yeah, and then number 11, we're going to go to Ole Miss. Got Ole Miss here. It's Georgia or Ole Miss for this spot, in my opinion. We discussed that. I think that's really what it is. And Ole Miss beat Georgia, and they just smoked them. It wasn't like it's a week 2 close game. They just absolutely obliterated them. And, it's not recency bias because it's how are the teams performing right now. Ole Miss, much better than Georgia, apparently. So, got them at 11.
Yeah, that was definitely the tough spot. It's the debate of how much do you value head-to-head versus how much do you value arguably the best one in the country, with Georgia going in and beating Texas. So, we kind of lean towards the head-to-head. Ole Miss smacked them. So, yeah, Ole Miss at 11. And then finally, kind of the CFP give a bid to a small school. That one goes to Boise State, who is still just a one-loss team. One loss being the Oregon, so that's no big deal. Barely lost that one. And they just keep winning. Ashton Genty still on a tear. I think another 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's ridiculous. But, yeah, Boise State gets a number 12 spot.
Yeah, close game against Nevada. I don't know how many people were tuned in because it was kind of expected to be a blowout. 7-point game against Nevada. Genty goes for, I think, 209 and 3 tutties, somewhere along those lines. And, boy, are they going to beat anyone that's good once they get to the playoff? Who knows? I don't think so. I don't think they're going to go on the road and beat Ohio State. But they almost went on the road and beat Oregon. So, you got to give them a shot. The first 2 teams out, we've got Georgia and we have SMU as those next 2 teams out. SMU is now technically first in the ACC standings. They're undefeated still in the ACC, and they should continue to be so. Hosting Boston College, going to Virginia, and hosting Cal. Those are some pretty middle-of-the-pack ACC teams. If they're anything like we really believe that they are, if that BYU close loss tells you anything, then they're solidly there at 14, and they got a pretty good shot to go in there and play Clemson or Miami, however that ends up playing out.
Yeah, SMU kind of a sleeper here to make the playoffs coming in as we round out the season. As far as Georgia goes, they are backs against the wall. They have to win out if they even want to get into the 12-win playoff team, which kind of leads us into our game of the week, Tennessee at Georgia. Not a playoff game for Tennessee, but definitely one for Georgia. They have to win this game if they want any chance at making the college football playoff. And Tennessee looking to get a bid to the SEC championship with a win here.
Yeah, I mean, major implications. If Georgia wins this game, the SEC becomes immediately super muddled, just a plethora of two-loss teams, and then Texas. And that's Tennessee's going to be my dog of the week. I think Tennessee should go in here and take care of business. Maybe Georgia does the thing where they go scorched earth like they did against Texas. I don't think they do. Tennessee's defense is going to play well. Georgia's offense has looked horrible, and I expect Tennessee to absolutely exploit that. They are 10-point underdogs.
10 points is crazy.
10 points, man. Like, I don't – man,
It is
maybe,
in
but
Athens.
it's in Athens, and that's about it. Like, that's the only thing I can really say about it. That's the only reason I would lean Georgia. It's not like their offense looks like it's going to hold Tennessee to, 3 points. And I don't think Georgia's scoring 20 against them. So, I think it's going to be close. Definitely love the spread there, Tennessee plus 10. And in terms of value, at plus 295, you got a chance to triple your money with a Tennessee win. They're my dog of the week. I think the value there is incredible.
Yeah, the value is fantastic. Tennessee looks like the better team right now. And I get that they're going into Athens, but 10 points, 10-point dogs, it's just crazy to me. They're going to be ranked quite a bit higher in the CFP. Their defense is phenomenal. I mean, Georgia barely scored against Ole Miss. I don't really see how much better they're going to do against Tennessee, who has a much better defense. I think Georgia is able to hold Tennessee pretty good defensively. So I like the under on this game. The total is set at 48.5. I like the under on that one.
Love the under. I love that under.
That's a lot of points for two teams that aren't phenomenal on offense and one team that's elite on defense. So, yeah, I'm with you. Give me Tennessee as a road dog against Georgia, knocking them out of the playoffs. It's definitely the game of the week. Game of the week, one you gotta watch if you care about the college football playoffs.
Yeah, and it's going to tell you a lot, like we discussed. Is Tennessee for real? Are they really one of those upper echelon championship contenders? Is Georgia as fraudulent as we maybe think right now? Massive implications. It's going to tell us a lot. I've got Tennessee 17-13 in that game.
That is low.
I don't see a lot of points, man. I don't know where. I don't know where Georgia's going to find them.
I think we get one team in the 20s. I think. I think.
Well, it's not going to be Georgia. I tell you what.
I don't think it's
going to
be Georgia. Yeah. I don't know. What would that? You're predicting 30 points, 18 points under the over/under. We'll see.
Yep.
Time will tell.
Yep. That's how I'm feeling about it. Next, we got Kansas at BYU. Now, this game, not that important for Kansas. They're just playing spoiler here. Huge for BYU. If they lose, they might be out of the top 12 entirely just based on the rest of their schedule and how they looked against Utah. Kansas, man, playing like maybe the best 3-6 team in the country all of a sudden. Close game with K-State 2 weeks ago. Then they come in and Iowa State makes it interesting late, but it was never really that close. Yeah,
Kansas
they were up
Iowa State.
Yeah, 38-13 at one point. 45-36 was your final, but it was never really in doubt. They took care of business. Kansas is a 3-point dog here. How are you feeling about this game?
Yeah, it's just one of those games where you kind of want to put BYU on upset watch. Being a 3-point favorite at home against a 3-6 team means Vegas is kind of fading BYU, and I kind of agree in some ways. The Big 12 isn't necessarily the strongest conference out there, and that's kind of that's where all of their ranked wins are coming from. They haven't shown a ton as far as like, oh, this is a dominant football team. And Kansas, as of late, barely losing to a top 25 team and then handling a top 25 team. So BYU is definitely on upset watch here. But this game has huge implications as far as the Big 12 goes. The Big 12 is going to be a tight race coming down to the finish. I mean, if BYU wins out, obviously they're in, they're undefeated, and they should get into the playoffs. But any loss for BYU, and we're talking about a team that is going to kind of sweat making the college football playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I got BYU here 26-21. That would mean they cover. But I think it's close, man. Kansas is playing well. BYU major fraud watch this week. BYU. Is it just the rivalry with Utah? We will see. Other big Big 12 action, Utah at Colorado. Now, at the beginning of the season, you would say Colorado's playing spoiler to Utah. That's probably what you would have guessed. We kind of see a reverse situation here from what we were expecting. We've got Utah as a 10.5-point dog, and they are at Colorado. Colorado controls their own destiny to get to the playoff. They went out there in, no questions about it. They'll win the Big 12 if that's the case. How you feeling about that one?
Yeah, a huge game as far as the Big 12 goes. Big 12, we kind of have three big ones here this week that we got a few teams in the mix, and Colorado is absolutely one of them. I think 10 points is a little bit too much against a Utah team that still has a top-notch defense. So I don't know if I'd give them 10, but I like Colorado to win this one, especially at home. And they win that one, man. Maybe not next week, but another win, and they're probably in the rankings in the top 12 before we even get to the CFP. So, or before we even get to the championship games. So, yeah, big game for Colorado. Not a big one for Utah. They're already out of it, but they could play spoils, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and still got a chance to make a bowl game. They're 4-5. How much do players really buy into that? I mean, it's hard to know. It probably varies program to program how much you really care about, especially when you have a team that had such high expectations coming into the year. But I love the Utah plus 10.5 line. I actually don't think they win this game. I really don't. But I love 10.5. I think that's a lot. I'm going 24-17 Colorado here. I think it's a late touchdown. Late touchdown puts it away. Then one more Big 12. A lot of Big 12 games like you were talking about. ASU at Kansas State. ASU sneakily, very sneakily 7-2, 4-2 in the conference. They have the tiebreaker to be in that number 3 spot in the Big 12. So they want any chance at keeping their playoff hopes alive, which is crazy to say. Heck of a job by Kenny Dillingham. I mean, I think they were 1-11 or something last year. Not a quality football team, man, but their losses are at Cincinnati and at Texas Tech, and so that doesn't spell playoff team for me in any sense. I don't even know if they get ranked this week, but they go and beat Kansas State. It gets really interesting. So how are we feeling in regards to that game, man? ASU 9-point underdog here.
I kind of like ASU to win this one. Kansas State, not they're not a bad football team by any means, but they're not a great one. And I think Arizona State, like you, that's an insane turnaround from going one win to now seven. That's nuts. So I kind of like Kansas State to at least cover that 9-point spread, and maybe even get a win. And I mean, if you beat Kansas State, you got BYU the week right after that, so they could seriously do some damage to the Big 12 and who gets in from the Big 12 in the playoffs. So yeah, I love them to cover the 9. Maybe even consider the money line there as a road dog.
Yeah, Kansas State kind of reeling here. Or they beat Kansas barely at home by 2 points, and then they go on the road and lose to Houston. And that's
That's a
confusing.
bad
I just
one.
don't.
That's a really
You
bad
you
one.
can't go lose that game. Got a bye week though. I think that's kind of what puts me over the edge. I like ASU to cover. I got Kansas State winning that game 30-24. I like ASU to cover. I think they have a bye. K-State's got a bye week though. I think that'll give them enough being at home. Night game. I think they should be able to take care of business. But that ASU winning that game would not shock me in the slightest. And then our next game, SEC game that we have to care about because Missouri is a 2-loss team, even though they
We
are
don't really need
terrible.
to care about it, but it
Yeah,
at least needs to be mentioned. South Carolina is the scariest. How many losses they got? Three?
3, 6-3.
They're the scariest three-loss team in the country. That team is stacked with some ridiculous talent. Their defensive line is stupid. They got a true freshman, or I think he's like 17 right now, and I think he's already up to like 8 sacks or something ridiculous. That team is stupid talented. And while they, have a few losses, they are so much better than Missouri. Missouri has shown nothing. Missouri's best win right now is Vanderbilt in OT,
Yeah, in
which
overtime.
Vanderbilt's been a solid team, but man, if that's your best win, every other good team that they've played, Texas A&M lost 41-10. Alabama lost 34-0. This is not a great football team. It's solid. They're beating the bad teams that they should beat. But South Carolina, like I said, is way more talented at home. They should be able to handle this, and then we don't need to talk about Missouri again.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to just not talk about Missouri anymore. I don't. I was never on the Missouri train, and I'm certainly not now. South Carolina 12.5 point favorites here. I expect them to cover 31-13. If you're counting, that would hit the over. The over/under in this game is 44.5. But I got 31-13. South Carolina, not close. Maybe keeps it interesting in the first half. But I think South Carolina ends up, winning this game pretty easily here. And then last game that we think is pretty big this week is going to be Clemson at Pitt. Now, I don't expect Pitt to be ranked anymore after their loss to Virginia. Clemson is still a 2-loss team, and they're both in the thick of the ACC standings. Man, Pitt's a 10-point dog. They're at home. I wish I didn't have to care about this game. It's kind of one of those where it's like, I don't think Pitt's that good. I don't think Clemson's that good. But someone from the ACC has to go to the playoff. So,
Give me Clemson in this
whatever.
one. I think Clemson is definitely the better football team here, and I think they handle business. And then Pitt will be completely out of it. Clemson will be trying their best to make it to the ACC championship, and have a good shot at doing so, I would say. But yeah, two teams I just don't really view as a threat, but yes, they are still technically in it. The winner of this game will technically be in it.
Yeah, I got 38-10 Clemson. I don't think this game's even kind of close. Pitt just has not impressed me. Not that Clemson, I think, is overwhelmingly good, but they've shown the ability to really handle bad teams.
Yep.
They blew out Virginia. Virginia just blew out Pitt. Now it's really boiling it down, obviously. But Pitt doesn't really have any of that high quality of wins. They just got blown out by SMU, too. So anytime they've seen, like, quality team, the most quality team they've seen anyway, they got blown out. And their win against West Virginia is not that impressive. Yeah, I expect Clemson to just absolutely dominate here.
Yep, I do too.
Yeah, and so then you said you've got your favorite line of the week is a game we didn't already talk about. How are we
Yeah,
feeling?
we haven't even talked about any of the Big Ten games this week. Still, few teams are going to make it from the Big Ten to the playoffs, but not really any notable games. But one I do want to mention is Oregon at Wisconsin. Oregon is a 14.5 point favorite against the 5-4 Wisconsin Badgers. Oregon's been just handling business against every single team that they've played. I think this spread is way too low for the number one team in the country to go into a Wisconsin team that had a decent showing against Penn State, but lost by 15. Got blown out by Iowa last week, which is crazy. Their best win at the moment is looking like Rutgers. They beat them 42-7. Just not a lot to write home about the Badgers, and to only have Oregon as a 14.5 point favorite. I think that's a little crazy. So give me Oregon to cover that spread as my favorite line of the week.
Yeah, I love that line too, man. I mean, Oregon's been dominating. They've looked good. There's a reason they're the number one team in the country. Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there. Any other thing that's tugging at you this week for college football?
No, I don't think so. I think we did a good job covering it. Texas at Arkansas. Arkansas, has beat Tennessee, so maybe worth looking at. Texas is a 13.5 point favorite. I think they cover that pretty handedly. Arkansas hasn't shown a ton as of late. That's kind of their only Big win there was that upset over Tennessee. But give me Texas. I think they handle business.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. And look, I appreciate you coming on, talking some college football with me. Big games this week, especially in the conference standings. Not a whole bunch of ranked matchups, but some big conference standing games to watch, specifically Georgia, Tennessee.
Yep. Keep an eye on the Big 12. And of course, keep an eye on Georgia, Tennessee game of the week. But thank you all for listening.
Yeah, y'all have a good day and go make some money this weekend.